the Ticats Audio Network. This is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
We are getting to the conclusion of the CFL season. Just 2 weeks remain, and we have decided nothing with the exception of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. This is the CFL This Week. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. And again, as I talk about every week, it's an all-star cast of characters, and we have brought in a rookie this week, Andrew Walker from Bodog.com, the all-star analyst, and formerly we know him from the Sportsnet radio in Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary. Andrew, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you.
Glen Suitor, of course, the name synonymous with the Canadian Football League, a decade out in Saskatchewan, a Grey Cup winner, and, of course, one of the top analysts in the sport. Glen, thanks for joining us.
Oh, a pleasure to be here. Can't wait to get going. Yeah, let's dig in.
Hey, and Tyler Shire, I mean, he knows, he's all over this Rough Rider teams. He probably knows more about Suitor than Suitor knows about him. Right out loud.
Hey, I grew up, not to date him, I grew up watching Glen. You kidding me? Saskatchewan boy over here.
Sorry for the missed tackles.
Let's kick things off right now in the center of the universe, and that being the Toronto, the Argonauts. Now, they are leading the East. Got a game lead over the Hamilton Tiger Cats as it stands right now. But let's talk about, I mean, I think the best player on their team right now is their field goal kicker. I mean, the guy's nailing kicks in 5 kicks all over every single game. But it seems like the quarterback play, I think, in my opinion, there seems to be some growth that needs to happen there, other than the win-loss record, which I guess is the most important. Bethel-Thompson, his performances have been kind of up and down. 3 interceptions in a very slim victory, Glen, over the Red Blacks this week. Is this a guy that can win the Grey Cup for you is the question?
It is a great question because until he gets a team there, until he leads a team to the championship, maybe not necessarily even win it, but leads a team to the game, you're going to continue to question this. I mean, here's a guy who has spent 11 years on 11 different teams. Now, there's a good side to that. He's learned a lot of different offenses. He's got a great perspective of the game in a lot of different ways. A lot of those teams were either NFL or CFL teams, the best 2 leagues on the planet. So all of that, it goes in the plus category with McLeod. The question is, why 11 teams? You know, why not a team when they pick him up, they see the potential of a championship quarterback and say, he's not going anywhere. He's our guy. So because of that question, in my opinion, I think that's why he will always have to try and, fight that perception when it comes to McLeod Bethel-Thompson. And this year we'll either take his legacy in one direction or the other.
Andrew, 2 touchdown passes in the last 3 weeks, 8 interceptions. Is that, again, a championship caliber quarterback, or is that a journeyman to you?
Yeah, it's somewhere in the middle, not to be on the fence, but I like him. But I've always kind of been a guy to stand up for, that middle ground, the mediocre guys, because, hey, you know, there's nothing worse than when you don't have a quarterback, and, you all want Anthony Calvillo or Henry Burris on your club, but more often than not, you don't get it. And when I look at Bethel-Thompson, I see a lot of good. I do see a guy, I think it's a floor and ceiling conversation. I see a guy that on any given day, and we'll see this week against Hamilton, such a huge game, maybe the biggest game of his CFL career, he has the ability to beat anyone, but there's also a floor there. But I look at the quote unquote elite quarterbacks even right now in the game. It wasn't that long ago that none of us were over the moon on what Zach Collaros was doing. Cody Fajardo was a backup for a bunch of years and has just recently kind of moved into that quote unquote elite group. There's a lot to like with Bethel-Thompson. I think the Argos are a nice story. So I don't necessarily feel there's a ton of pressure there, but I'd ask you this too. You talk about 11 teams in 11 years and committing to a guy. I mean, they kind of just did that, right? They trade Arbuckle out west, and for the first time in, maybe 11 years, you got a quarterback that's not looking over his shoulder. I wonder if that makes a difference to him.
But Taylor, that's a great point that Andrew brings up. I thought, and this is the way the season came in there when Dinwiddie came in there, the big talk was that Arbuckle was the guy. He was going to be the quarterback of our future for the next decade. And now he's gone. And it's right back to Bethel-Thompson.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like when he first came in. And I was kind of surprised when I saw that trade come down at this point in the season, because in the CFL, it's nice to have two capable starting quarterbacks. And I think the Argos had that before the trade. And now they put all their eggs into a guy who, in Bethel-Thompson, he's a guy to me that could lead the league in touchdowns and interceptions in any given year and be at the top in both. He's not that elite. He's not in that elite top 3 tier, and he's certainly not in the bottom 3, but he's kind of right in the middle for me. But I'm still surprised that they did trade away a guy who could start in Arbuckle, because then you don't have that. You get rid of that competition a little bit and looking over your shoulder. And I think competition does make, the quarterback room better. And when you just have one guy now that's penciled in as the starter, or penned in as the starter for the rest of the year, now I think he gets rid of that competition.
But can he win you? That's what I mean. He can get you there, obviously, because look at the win-loss record, and some of that has been shared with Arbuckle. But Glen, can he get you there? Can he win the big game? And
yeah.
I mean, you've seen more quarterbacks than all of us together. I mean, and over Grey Cup lore, yeah, there's been some great guys like a Calvillo and a Henry Burris and a Damon Allen and a Matt Dunnigan. But there's also been some other guys that you're like, he won a Grey Cup.
Yeah, I mean, part of the evaluation is the level of consistency that you're looking for. Is you see the flashes for sure with Bethel-Thompson, and that's why all the NFL teams saw those same flashes, and so have all the CFL teams. And I agree. I think there are games when I watch him thinking, wow, he does have all the tools to be able to get you there, but the perception won't change until he does. And, that's the difference between looking at the trade with Trevor Harris to Montreal and thinking Montreal just got better automatically because Trevor Harris has got a team to the championship game. He's led a team to the championship game. So because of that, the perception based on his resume is he can do it. But McLeod Bethel-Thompson doesn't have that. And that's why that question mark, I think, will hang in there. And this is you're right. You're bang on. This coming weekend will tell you a lot. This is a big game. This is like playoff game 1 for both these teams, Hamilton and Toronto.
Okay, we'll end on that. But let Andrew, you're the big Bodog guy. You got all the odds, and you know how to work the room that way. The odds-on favorite right now to win the Grey Cup have to be the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. But boy, did they really look a little shaky for 3 quarters and then turned it on when they needed to, I guess you could say that, to beat the Montreal Alouettes. This is going to be, when you clinch so early, how difficult is it to maintain that consistency? And because you've clinched so early, do you start to get a little leaky? Do you start leaking some oil a little bit later in the season, like we might have saw this week?
I mean, I think you can. It doesn't concern me. If you're Winnipeg, you worry about, not worry, but, you get your guys your reps. You try to stay healthy. Everything you do is just to set things up for your next big game, which is the West Final. If you want to make a bet on the Bombers to win the Grey Cup, you're not making a ton of money because they are a clear. Honestly, I don't remember the last time that there was this big of a clear favorite. And the one thing that we've always been able to say about Winnipeg is, well, it's the Bombers, it's the curse. They haven't won forever. Well, that's kind of over now, right? They kind of got rid of the ghost. So even from that vantage point, I don't worry about the Bombers at all. They could get their doors blown off the next couple of weeks. And I'm not worried. The Grey Cup goes through that city. And the only reason that they won't win a championship this year, and we've seen it every year, how many Grey Cups combined have we all been to? Crazy things happen in that game, right? That there's no rhyme or reason for what happens in the CFL championship game. So they're going to get there. I mean, I have very, very few doubts about that. The only thing stopping in their way is some weird twist of fate in the championship.
Taylor, do you see the Bombers being like the Ticats of 2019?
Well, I don't remember the last time, and I don't know if you guys have any thoughts, but when was the last time a team did clinch with a month left and really had nothing to play for? But
it's probably the Alouettes like 8-9 years ago.
Yeah. And I personally think, Winnipeg having won in 2019, I think they'll be fine. they can turn it on when they need to. They had a year and a half off, and they picked up right where they left off at the start of the season. And I think Mike O'Shea will have that team ready for December 5th. And I don't see any issues with them getting ready for that game. The only thing I will say is playing a playoff game in Winnipeg in December, anything can happen. There could be, you never know what the temperature will be. I still think if it's a colder game, it'll help the Winnipeg defense against whatever offense comes in there, whether it be Saskatchewan or Calgary. I doubt BC will make it there, but I think if they win the West, which I think they will, they'll have no problem going against the East in the Grey Cup.
Glenn, I don't know if you're a Grey Cup team. I don't remember your Grey Cup team being that solid off the beginning of the regular season. But I mean, you've played the game. You've been in that situation where you have to motivate yourself for, okay, we've clinched, but now it's week 12. Now it's week 13. You have to continue to motivate yourself or find reasons to win games and pull them out of the hat, I guess. Now, how difficult is that?
Yeah, difficult to keep the winning habits, the good habits that you have. There was a reason that they've won 11 games this season and not given up a point in the fourth quarter, or a major in the fourth quarter. 2 field goals all season long, and that's it. I mean, that is unheard of, really. And that's how good this team is. But I feel real strongly about this, guys, and I'm sort of an outlier, I think, on this. But I'm resting Zach. I'm not dressing him for the next 2 games. I am saying if he's a little rusty in Series 1 of the Western Final, I'll live with that. But if he hits a helmet on a follow through and has a bad thumb going into the Western Final, that's the only real question mark we have now of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and how good they are. Is can Sean McGuire, if needed, lead them to a champion or to the Grey Cup? And that's really their only question mark. And I would hate to lose Zach in a game that doesn't matter in the standings to the Bombers.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, because I guess you got the running back that's hurt right now. Oliveira comes in there. He didn't look that great last week, and it was Augustine that actually played some good football. Andrew, do you agree with that? I mean, that's a big statement by pulling Zach Collaros and putting him on the sideline for the next couple of weeks, or what would end up being almost a month of not playing.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think we've seen this in all kinds of sports, and there's always, the final week of the NFL season, there's always a controversy too, whether Tom Brady or Peyton Manning sat over the years. These are competitors, right? We can sit here and say, sit this guy or pull that guy out. Players want to play, competitors want to compete, especially quarterbacks, probably the toughest position in all the sports. So I think it's a great idea. I mean, if we're looking at on paper, I'd probably do the same thing, Glenn, but you'd be hard pressed to not let the guy play a few series, I think.
Taylor, you agree?
Yeah, I think I don't expect him to finish every game down the stretch here, but I expect him to play and suit up. And you never know what bonuses he has tied into his contract too, where he's like, I want to play to get this, right? So it's going to be, I think it'll be up to him. I think Mike O'Shea and company over there will leave it up to Zach for how much he wants to play. I don't think, like I said, I don't think O'Shea will let him finish maybe the second half. So I think he'll play the first halves of these next 2 games for sure.
This is also a guy, though, that not exactly an Iron Man, right? Like I said, it's a tough position. I know we're going to talk about Mike Riley a little later, but you take a lot of abuse at that position. Zach Collaros hasn't exactly had this pristine, healthy career. So for sure, it's a worry.
Yeah, and we had a video pack in the last game that was queued up and ready. We never got to it because we changed directions in the TV show, but we had a shot of the hits that Zach was taking in the game against Montreal this past weekend, that he'd get rid of the ball, but he was still getting hit. And I thought, you're putting him in harm's way. And, when you talk about the rust argument, he went a year and a half without playing a game, and then they went 4-0 to start the season. If there was going to be rust on a quarterback, it might have been then. And he looked great in the first 4 games of the regular season. Now, that's not a championship, and that's not at this point of the year either. But I would not risk it with him. And you're right, the player wants to play. The player wants to go, and he'll try to make his argument. But that's where I think the coach steps in and says, "I'm going to protect you against yourself."
Taylor, I want to come at you with this one here, because you were the guy in Regina where I think pretty much most of us, when the season started, thought that the West Division was going to come down between the Rough Riders and the Bombers. And I think the Bombers have obviously clinched and made their statement. I don't know how much you hear reports that there's a rift between the offensive coordinator, Jason Maas, and Cody Fajardo, the quarterback. And I would be the first to say that I think Cody is sort of underachieved at times this season. You know, they put them there. At one time, they were a 500 football team. Is there an issue there? Is this team offensively underachieving?
Well, I think they're certainly rusty, and I think it starts with the offensive line. They've just really had an inconsistent offensive line. I still think Cody hasn't played up to his potential, and they have a few young receivers prior to Shaq Evans and Duke Williams coming back. They've had a few young receivers who just didn't really live up to the standard of being a veteran CFL player without having those two in the lineup. And now between Jason Maas and Cody Fajardo, I think there was a lot of talk, because you see these sideline conversations where both guys are heated. And I think that's what it is. You see two competitive guys going at each other on the sidelines, and we don't know what's saying, but that's all it is. I don't think it's a negative relationship. I think they actually have a very solid relationship, the two of them, but they're just both really competitive. And that's what you see. You see that 10-second clip on the sidelines of them going back and forth. But you look at both those guys, they're both very animated guys, as opposed to a Stephen McAdoo, or I'm trying to think of a previous offensive coordinator that's been in these parts that kind of just sits back, and maybe they have animated meetings behind closed doors, but they're not outwardly. We've seen Jason Maas on the sidelines before get heated up. He's just that competitive of a guy. And I think Cody is the same. So they have a really good relationship from what I can tell. I think it's just two guys being competitive.
I think you watch this team, guys, and there's just such a want to see from the fan base throw the ball down the field, right? And Duke Williams might have changed everything. I mean, I was at the game here in Edmonton on Friday. I was too consumed with the $2 hot dog, so I didn't see the whole game. But it's just not what you expected. This dink and dunk type of offense, and they won that game with their defense. And when they really kind of delivered the death blow, what are they doing? They're looking deep over the middle to Duke Williams. I think they have the ability to open up that playbook a little more, and I think that's where you see maybe the Cody Fajardo animated self on the sidelines, because I think he believes in himself. But you're right too, Taylor. It comes down to the O-line, but they're going to have to stretch the field a little bit if they hope to win, the West Semi or win in Winnipeg.
But Glenn, isn't Cody a better quarterback when he's dinking and dunking? He doesn't really seem to me to be that deep ball thrower.
He can throw the deep ball. It is, excuse me, an off year for him in the deep ball. There's no question about that. That's been his issue this year. And I think about Jason Maas. You think back to him as a head coach. We're probably a play away from losing headsets over there on the sideline, because that he will just, that's who he is. So I don't think we should read into that. I have not heard of any rift between offensive coordinator, quarterback in Saskatchewan. So I really haven't. Cody has struggled with the deep ball for sure, but I love his competitive edge. He has found a way to put that team in second behind the best team in the league, one of the best teams in the last 10 years in the league in Winnipeg. And he's a scrapper. And I think you can admire that about him. Not his best year for sure. And off the field as well, he said some things that he's had to apologize for in the heat of the battle. So, we'll see how it transpires. I think they do have the talent, though, to, as you guys mentioned, to have that game where they start hitting deep balls and they come in bunches and they start to really stretch the field and explode.
But Glenn, you again, because you've played the game, I need to ask you this question first. Like, we have seen this in the past. I mean, whether it's, Jim Kelly or Dan Marino, people in the past in all games, really, in both leagues, where often Tom Brady, I remember having a real animated conversation with his OC at one time. I mean, they're yelling at each other. And you see that. And of course, you work for TSN. The cameras are going to capture it. And as fans, we're left to decipher what's going on there. Is it usually nothing?
Usually nothing. Yeah. I mean, if it's really serious, the coach is going to take you behind closed doors in his office and he's going to have that discussion with you one-on-one. And if it's something where, there may be a suspension down the road or something like that, where it's a real rift or a real issue, they'll deal with it in-house. You will see the reaction, the emotional reaction, but usually on the sideline, those are just two guys really frustrated in the moment and giving their opinion as forcefully as they can. Now, I had a very different style because I was afraid to be cut at every turn. So I didn't mess with yelling at a coach. I guarantee you that. I just changed the call in the huddle when it came from the sideline and not tell him I was doing it. But no, you know what? He's a feisty guy. And so is Jason Maas.
Andrew, I know you like to bring the heat every once in a while.
Yeah. Oh, I've gotten into yelling matches with producers and co-hosts, no doubt. That's just part. Then you move on and you're professional the next day. I think it's the same on the field.
I will say, I'll just add in, we did ask Cody about this. I believe it was after he threw that last second interception to Ricardo Lewis against Calgary. We did, because they had a heated conversation right prior. And we did ask him about that. And he said, no, him and Jason have a great relationship, but like any two competitors, there are arguments and there are times where they don't agree with each other. And I think that's part of just being a competitor. And when you put two different philosophies up against each other, there's going to be arguments and times where people don't see eye to eye. And that's just, comes with having two guys who are ultra competitive.
And he's not a shrinking violet either. Cody Fajardo's not afraid to give his opinion. He gives his opinion and be in the media and be forthright in interviews. That's kind of his personality too, along with Jason Maas, like Glen said.
Glen, you talked about this pack that you guys put together at TSN of Zach Galeros. For whatever reason, when I was up top at Tim Hortons Stadium this Friday watching the Lions and Tiger Cats play, I was watching, because I remember the abuse that Mike O'Reilly took last year for just a poor offensive line. Mm-hmm. Now, I think the line has improved this season, but he is taking hellacious hits and somehow continues to get up. And at one point I just kind of turned over and talked to Hall of Famer, a couple of guys in the media booth. And I just kind of said, is this guy the toughest guy, at least one of the toughest quarterbacks we've ever seen? This guy, as they say, takes a licking and keeps on ticking.
Yeah, he is. He is that guy for sure. And we'll do it for the right reasons, because he's trying to put the collective goal of the team ahead of any of his own personal thoughts or desire to avoid those hits. Real tough, but it's I think it goes beyond the O-line with his team and protection over the last couple of years. And they've got to get a receiving core in there that understands the game. That might take a few more hits until they get young guys up to speed where they can beat blitzes, because there are often times where a defense now, especially against a struggling O-line, a defense will send an extra man. And that extra man is often not blocked, and he's a responsibility of the quarterback to get rid of the ball before he gets there. That requires the receivers to see it, recognize it, and go to the spots they need to be in. I think they've struggled at that for 2 straight years, and that's as much a reason as Riley's taken all these hits as the O-line.
Taylor?
I'll say Mike O'Reilly is the toughest quarterback in the league, and I think you see that on a weekly basis. But I will go further and say that I think the majority of the offensive linemen in the CFL are the toughest players. You see what they go through every play, and they just get up, whether they get rolled on or whether they take a big hit almost every play and they get right back up. Dan Clark's a prime example. You see him picking himself up off the turf almost every play. And, he's beat up and bruised and he just keeps on chugging. He rolled his ankle on day 2 of practice this past week. There was no question he was going to play. He got in a car accident 2 weeks before training camp, went through a window, was ejected from the car, didn't miss a game, right? Like guys like that to me are just the ultra competitive, and it's part of playing that position in this rough sport where you are like, that's your job, is to hit people and get hit, right? I think a quarterback, if they didn't get hit per game, they would be happy, but an offensive lineman, that's what they want to do.
You know what amazes me about Mike Riley and guys like Mike Riley, because you're one of 2 things. You are, if you are a long time quarterback in the CFL or the NFL, generally speaking, it means you've made a career out of not getting hit, right? Like good luck hitting Damon Allen, good luck, getting a good lick on Tom Brady or Anthony Calvillo over the years. That's how they stay in the league so long and put up the numbers they do. And then you see, a quarterback, especially in the CFL, where you really, I think, have to weigh the risk reward of, hey, am I going to keep putting myself up to this punishment to be a backup quarterback or whatever? We see the CFL as the last stop for a lot of guys. Growing up in Saskatchewan, I saw so many quarterbacks come in and just get beat up and have to leave. Steve Sarkisian and Heath Rylance, and you go down the list. And then I look at Mike Riley. He takes more abuse than anybody, but he's also in his 12th season in the league. Like you don't have a guy that takes those hits and yet still is a 10-year, 11-year all pro type of quarterback or all CFL type of quarterback. It's kind of unheard of in a lot of ways.
Glenn, I remember a year, I think it might have been 1999, where Danny McManus, and the number stays in my head, I believe, was sacked 9 times in an 18-game regular season. 9. Yeah. That's unheard of. Now, you would know because as a DB, he had the quick release. Now, could I say Michael Riley has a slow release?
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
Does he invite some of this contact?
Yeah, very different style for sure. In fact, I remember having a conversation with Danny McManus at one point in the broadcast booth, and he said, I figured out early in my career that when I had the ball in my hand, that's where the guys were coming. They were going to hit me with it. If I had the ball, they were going to hit me. So I made a point of saying, I'm going to get it out of my hand as quickly as I possibly can. So that was his philosophy from the very beginning. And yes, he had that razor sharp, quick release. So it's a combination of the recognition, the receivers knowing where to be, the O-line giving the, 3 steamboats or 4 that you need, and then Riley getting the ball to where he needs to get it. But again, I'm going to put part of this on the coaching staff. Why can't this organization find 2 stud American tackles? There is no reason that they're still working through Joel Figueroa, who has had great years, but if that's an issue, there's lots of guys that are looking for an opportunity down south. Go find yourself an American tackle. Find yourself some young receivers that will learn quickly, recognize, and get to the maybe not Brian Burnham stage, but will understand the game. Yeah.
Taylor, do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think Michael Riley's a guy who is okay with taking a hit to make a play. We talk about that in hockey all the time, but he's totally fine having that slower release and knowing that there's a guy open and he's going to get corked right after he releases the ball. I think he's okay with that because he's fine with if the ball is going to be completed, he'll take a hit almost every time. But just like here in Saskatchewan, if you don't have a good offensive line, you're going to take a few licks. And we've seen Cody Fajardo take a number of licks this year just because of his weaker offensive line.
Guys, next week, it'll be Friday at BMO Field. It really could be arguably the game of the year. It should decide the East Division between the Tiger Cats and Toronto Argonauts. And as we all know, these 2 teams don't like each other. They never do. It all starts at Labor Day. And we have seen some really tense games and games that have come right down to the final kick, the final throw. But with everything on the line, Andrew, do you like the Tiger Cats or do you like the Argonauts?
I like the Ticats a lot, and I actually don't even really think it's that close. I know it's funny because I was defending Bethel-Thompson a little earlier. I think they're a great story. I think Bethel-Thompson has the ability to beat anyone. I just really like the way that Hamilton is trending right now. They get the quarterback back. Brandon Bank showed signs of life last week. I really like the way Hamilton's going. And to be honest, if I had to pick a team that could potentially hang with Winnipeg in a Grey Cup, it probably would be Hamilton right now. I like them heading into this game. I'd pick Hamilton by a touchdown.
Glad I'm not sure if you're on the game. So what do you think?
I'm not. No, I'm not. Yeah. That I don't normally make predictions. I do like Hamilton though. I like, as was mentioned earlier, their competition at quarterback. I think that makes the room better. It makes their team better. I think Jeremiah Masoli's playing some of his best football in a long time. I love that they've added a running element in Don Jackson and Sean Thomas Erlington, sort of, in tandem. But, a healthy Don Jackson in a playoff game, or this game this weekend, is really been a difference maker for them. And I've always liked their defense from the beginning, especially their front seven from the beginning of the year on. So because of all those reasons, and the question mark hanging over McLeod, Bethel-Thompson, as we talked about off the top, I like Hamilton. I like Hamilton in the Eastern Division. I think Montreal is a very interesting team, but in this matchup, I like Hamilton.
Taylor, it's funny because the Tiger Cats offense really has been just growing, and you see the confidence in Jeremiah Masoli getting, I think, very close to what we saw him in 2018, where he was a guy that was up for MOP. But isn't this where Chris Jones is supposed to shine, and that Argonaut defense?
Well, I think that he will play a large factor in this game, but I still think Hamilton's defense, the parts that they have, will be better than Toronto's defense with Chris Jones and all the pieces that they have, just because Hamilton has been there, done that before. And I think their coaching staff with Steinauer I don't think Jones has enough say on Toronto's sidelines quite yet for the overall scheme of the entire game. I think he calls the defensive plays, but I don't think he has enough say to really control the game. I think he can call his blitzes whenever he wants. But I still think this game is the defense will prevail. And I think Hamilton's defense will be better than Toronto's defense, and the offenses will be whatever they are. Right.
Andrew, you just brought up a great name, and Brandon Banks. He's had, guy, I can't remember an MOP coming off an MOP season that's had an injury filled, can't get into gear. But if he has shown last game against BC, and there were spurts there against Edmonton, that he could be once again the most exciting guy. Anytime that ball gets into his hand, anything can happen.
Yeah, it's amazing because he's clearly not the guy he used to be, and he'll be the first to tell you that. But everybody around him just calls him one of the most competitive guys on the team, and that'll carry you a long way. He's a smart player. I read an interview this week with him. He was happy, obviously, to get in the end zone for the first time in, a couple of years, but he said something to the effect of, hey, like I'm fine if we win and I get no targets, let those other guys catch 10 balls a game. And I think you need that, but he has a role to play yet this season for sure.
Glenn, he's really matured, I would say, over the years.
Yeah, that is a sign of maturity, by the way, because, an unsolicited comment like, I don't need to have a catch as long as we win from him is something that I don't think we would have heard 3 or 4 years ago. So I agree that is a sign of real growth and an understanding of what's most important, which is that ultimate goal. So yeah, I think, at any time he can dominate a game. I mean, he forces defenses to get out of their back pedal. And it's a special talent that, Brian Burnham isn't that guy. He's not a guy that makes you turn early. That's what Brandon Banks does. He makes you back out. He makes you worried that he's going to beat you deep, and he can work that all game long. So this is an interesting set of games though, guys, because this year more than any, I'll just throw it out there too, is we have the David and Goliath. No matter who gets in the cup, if the Bombers are there, and we all believe that they're the favorite, strong favorite, it really sets up any one of their opponents, could be anybody, is the David and Goliath scenario.
Agree, Taylor?
Yeah, I like I said earlier, I think the winner of the Grey Cup will come through the West. I still believe it's Winnipeg, but if Calgary or Saskatchewan can knock off Winnipeg, I still think they will overmatch any Eastern team when it comes down to that final game, especially with it being likely a colder game in Hamilton in mid-December. I still like Hamilton coming out of the East because, like I said, they've been there, done that. But whoever comes out of the East is the underdog, no matter what. And if it's the 3 teams out of the West versus the 3 teams out of the East, you match up any one of the 3. The West Division team will be the favorite.
Andrew, kill this West bias, please.
Well, no, like I said earlier, obviously Winnipeg, it is going to be a David and Goliath, but it's not the first time we've seen this in a Grey Cup. You go back to Calvillo's Alouettes or even that crazy, Henry Burris, Ottawa Grey Cup in Toronto a few years back. David and Goliath, we've seen that before, but David always finds a way to keep it close, if not win. Like I said before, so much goes into the Grey Cup game, and wacky things have happened. Crazy things have happened in that game. So while Winnipeg is obviously the prohibitive favorite, I'm not going to be surprised to see a classic game in the Grey Cup, whoever they face.
All right, guys, let's blow the final whistle on this week's edition of the CFL this week. You guys have been outstanding. Thank you so much to our guests, Glen, Suitor, Taylor Shire, and Andrew Walker, for their words of wisdom and, of course, their predictions of the Tiger Cats, which really worries me for this week's game. Again, folks, thanks so much for joining us as well. To you, the fans, again, you continue to come up in numbers, and you know where to find us now on your podcast catcher. This is the CFL This Week. Also on YouTube, like and subscribe. We'd love you to know when these kind of videos come up. And of course, we're giving you all kinds of coverage here on the Ticats Audio Network. For the CFL This Week, I'm Bubba O'Neil on the Tiger Cats Audio Network. Take care.
The CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil. Subscribe, like, and get the deepest takes on Canada's game every Monday.